Herbert Hoover, one of the lowest rated presidents in American history, took office during a period of great economic uncertainties, which we now recognize as the early stages of the Great Depression. Although the Great Depression happened 7 months after Hoover took office, he was not the only person to blame for the entire Great Depression, but his tariffs, the infamous Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, dramatically worsened the Great Depression. His intentions with his tariffs were the following: build a wall with high tariffs to protect American industries and workers, allowing the domestic economy to restore itself. Hoover believed that the cheap goods from other countries are taking away American jobs. It must be stopped and can only be stopped with high tariffs. It means if I was Hoover's America, then whoever I do business with, I would like to have all the pros and I want to have none of the cons. When I buy, I want to pay no taxes, and when I sell, I should get paid with taxes and 20% tips. This would have worked if the person I bullied never retaliated. But a person is a whole different concept than a country. If you bully one person, potentially you can get away with it because it's all about who has the bigger muscles. If you bully a country, however, which has many different groups of people of interest within, whoever is leading those groups of people of that country, it's always bad for him personally to be seen as someone who doesn't retaliate. So of course, they always retaliate. Maybe it even makes sense if they don't retaliate, but they have to, or get replaced, sometimes executed, then get replaced by someone who is possibly much more likely a nationalist, and after that they still retaliate, and after that all hell breaks loose. Which is exactly what happened with the Smoot-Hawley Act that was signed on June 1930. The Japanese invaded China in September 1931 because they are still trade dependent, and the act was going to basically starve them to death. And the Nazis took over Germany in January 1933, thus set the stage for WW2, the most brutal war in human history. When you apply massive tariffs to everybody else, what you are not thinking is, well, what everybody else is going to do. The answer is almost always retaliate exactly in kind. And that is why Warren Buffett publicly stated that tariffs are an act of war, because they are an act of war.
As for the cause of war, come on, give me a break. There are a lot of theories out there, but
tariffs can be used for good only when they are very, very focused. Good tariffs can protect domestic factories and companies, especially in the early stages of building their businesses. But yet again, they have to be very, very focused. A rule of the thumb is, the less focused the tariffs are, the more damage they're going to do than good. In the last video of mine, which is also the first video that I did, received a massive amount of views and likes, thank you very much. I briefly talk about the lost generation of Japan. This is the generation of young people that just got to the working age when the bubble burst happened during the 1990s. So of course, they couldn't find jobs, they couldn't afford housing, they couldn't afford anything at the time. And even to today, many of them are still struggling terribly, because they couldn't compete with someone who's much younger than them and willing to get paid in much less dollars. I found it reasonable to believe that this generation of young people in the West are becoming the Western version of Japan's lost generation of the 1990s in 2025, because they have so many terrifying similarities. They can't afford anything. They can't afford housing, they can't afford a pair of shoes without cutting their budgets from somewhere else. They can't afford to date, to marry, to have children. So of course, the birth rate drops, which is the single biggest time bomb for any economy. Also, they're constantly being called lazy and unwilling to work by mostly the baby boomers, while nobody is willing to hire them to give them work to do. So that is wonderful. The similarities are actually too many to list, but basically this current generation of young people in the West are the poorest generation living in the richest era and countries we have ever seen in human history, which is very bad for stabilities. I look happy because I know there's nothing I can do about it, so I give up. The more we look into human history, the more we're going to find that humans are much more predictable and much more animalistic than we are willing to admit. But that is not the point of this video. At least let me make my video with a good ending. So the point of this video is, what can you do personally for such an unstable future ahead? The best preparation anyone, especially someone who is young from the Western world, can do, in my not so humble opinion, is to learn and to experience from the other side, the eastern side of the world. This includes anything from taking a trip to China, to learning Japanese from ground up, or moving to an Eastern country all at once. I have two arguments for this claim. Number one is, things are just so much more affordable over there, so much cheaper, and in many cases, much higher qualities. And number two is, by learning their cultures, languages, histories, you can obtain what is called an information gap. Meaning, say, if you speak fluent Chinese or Japanese and able to read their newest news and policies before everybody else in the West can, before the market reacts, potentially you can utilize that information to profit from the market. This is only one of many ways to take advantage of the information gap. You can also start a copycat company in the States or in the West based on something you saw in China or Japan that doesn't yet exist in the West. Traditionally, in the last 100 to 200 years, people used to bring back ideas from the US to other countries. But in recent years, we've been seeing so many reverse examples as well. Now, if you are thinking about moving internationally, especially to one of the Eastern countries such as China or Japan, just keep in mind that you should learn the language as much as you can. That's number one before you go. Number two is to try to get a remote job that pays you in decent US dollars. If you can manage both of those two things, that should set you up for a very decent and a very comfortable life ahead of you for a while, because the USD is still the king. If you still need some additional help, I have an ebook linked in description made with some lesser known Chinese wisdoms, but more importantly, my own personal international travel and living experiences. It's the best way to support this channel, but it's also really helpful for people who are interested in foreign cultures or considering to move to one of the Eastern countries. It's particularly helpful to people who are thinking about moving to China or Japan. Considering I'm Chinese and living in America and moving to Japan soon, that is how this ebook came to be. I'm going to finish this video with some arguments in favor of wide-range tariffs. Argument number one is, wide-range tariffs are somewhat likely to bring down the housing prices down significantly, which is something that this generation definitely needs. Argument number two, it's most definitely going to bring down the stock prices, and maybe that is when the younger generation can finally chip in. After all, most young people don't own anything anyway, so if something similar to 2008 happens again to a generation that doesn't have much to lose in the first place, maybe it's a good time for them to finally share a piece of the success that's been held by the baby boomers for so long. The next video will be focused on the crush of the Japanese housing market. Please stay tuned.